Hey everybody, Haircut McVicker here. How you guys doing today? We're gonna do a tier list for all the Valve games. We have some interesting ones in this list. So we're gonna just go in order here. First one is Alien Swarm. So Alien Swarm had the potential to be a significantly better game than it ended up being. Alien Swarm was a mod. Valve bought the team in 2005 to turn it into an official source game. It went through a bunch of different iterations. For what it's worth, the one campaign that we have access to, it's very good. The community has taken it upon themselves to release more. Valve actually contracted a lot of community creators for Alien Swarm and outright purchased the rights to a few of the major community-made campaigns for an update that was supposed to ship with Alien Swarm, as well as Mac OS support for Alien Swarm back in 2011. That's all to say that in its current iteration, Alien Swarm is a C. The orange box, S. Best thing that Valve has ever done. Counter-Strike Source. Counter-Strike Source was weird. When it came out, a lot of the diehards stuck with 1.6. Counter-Strike Source is fun. Counter-Strike Source is the worst of the official Counter-Strike implementations, in my opinion. I'm gonna put Counter-Strike Source in C. Counter-Strike 1.6, that's an A. That box represents the official release of Counter-Strike. That box, we're talking about Counter-Strike, Valve's Half-Life Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike is the most important multiplayer shooter in history. It did so much for the industry and creating tactical competitive gameplay. All right, next one is Half-Life 2 Episode 1. I'm gonna put Episode 1 as a D. Okay, Half-Life 2 Episode 1 is my least favorite Half-Life release. Was the product of a rushed development cycle that the majority of Valve didn't even want to partake in. Was the start of the experiment that killed the Half-Life franchise for over a decade. And the majority of the gameplay that you're experiencing in Episode 1, in my mind, falls into two categories. Recycled content from Half-Life 2 that was cut. Content that was made specifically to showcase their companion tech and later used to its full potential in Left 4 Dead 2. The strongest point for me for Episode 1 is it's the final time we've seen Barney Calhoun canonically. He rides away on the train right before the final Strider battle, and we never see him again. I'm going to skip ahead and go to Half-Life 2 Episode 2. That is an S. It is the most Half-Life 2 of all of the Half-Life 2s, and is the one that has aged the best, because they really understood, after, at this point, a decade of Half-Life development, what worked. And even though they were up against the clock trying to push everything together in the orange box, and even though there was a whole lot of office politics behind it that I hope one day to be able to talk about, it's the best Half-Life game. It is the most affecting experience in the Half-Life series, even to this day. Half-Life Alyx only packs a punch because of Episode 2's existence. The final battle isn't a boss battle, it's like this experimental open world experience. Magnuson is the only time I've seen a retconned into the series that felt immediately welcome. Episode 2 was the true introduction of Eric Wolpaw and Chet Falasak's humor. Team Fortress 2, A. Team Fortress 2 isn't an S because everything that kind of surrounds Team Fortress 2. The Team Fortress 2 that we currently play and the Team Fortress 2 that released in 2007 are very different experiences. If I were rating OG 07 TF2, S. I am rating TF2 as we currently see it, where at the current time is just a lazy cash cow that Valve continues to milk dry. They don't try on their updates, they don't test the shit they push, and they're just releasing stuff to the community on a quarterly basis to rake in profits from key sales and, most importantly, community market sales. It's silly as hell. It is one of the only instances of multiplayer character archetypes being the most beloved characters in their own right, separate from the thing. And you can argue Overwatch, but Overwatch has always just been an imitation of what Valve did with TF2 in its glory days. I'm putting TF2 as an A because it has a lot of baggage attached to it. Next is CSGO. CSGO is a B. CSGO is experimental. CSGO is willing to push the envelope. I don't have a whole bunch to say about CSGO because I'm not a massive CSGO fan. I've played hundreds of hours of it. It was part of my life for a very long time, but it's not something I hold as, like personally close to me like I do Team Fortress 2 or Counter-Strike 1.6. All right, next, Half-Life 2 Deathmatch. That's a D. Overrated, boring as hell. Moving on. Left 4 Dead 1, that's a B. Left 4 Dead 1 is a really strange beast. Left 4 Dead 1 is the product of two very different companies trying to collaborate on a project, and eventually one side of the collaboration just kind of took over. Left 4 Dead 1's flaws is the product of conflicting priorities, and you can kind of sense that in its tonal whiplash that you can experience from time to time. The characters feel almost like they're winking at you the whole time, and that's part of the gag. But the level design and the atmosphere feel like, no, this is actually happening. This is real shit. And it just feels like it's not as cohesive as, say, something like Left 4 Dead 2, which is an A. Left 4 Dead 2 is just pure co-op bliss. It's everything that Left 4 Dead 1 did, but better. Just the most inventive with its campaigns and trying to vary everything up between campaign to campaign. Pioneered the Steam Workshop. It's just so incredibly important to the industry, especially nowadays where we have dozens of copycats coming out of it. The only thing that's keeping it from being an S is... Nah, fuck it. It's an S. Okay, never mind. Ricochet, that's obviously an S. Dota 2, hell. Not even getting into it. Underlords, A. Here's the thing. I fucking loved Dota Underlords. Underlords came out and was popular at the same time that Half-Life Alyx was happening. If you weren't paying attention to Underlords when it was in beta and then released and then season 1 and the updates following that, there was a Twitter account and a Discord server where Valve employees were incredibly talkative. It felt like Valve had broken out of their shell, realized that in modern day, if you want to have a successful games as a service, you need to talk about it with your fans. The characters that they had created for it, people like Jol and Anesix, if you didn't play the game, you probably didn't know. They were fantastic characters. They were incredibly interesting. Everything about that game just spoke to me. I loved how they took the auto chess formula, which I did not really like, and turned it into something that I really, really enjoyed. I was addicted to it for a really long time because it worked on iOS flawlessly. Remember, Underlords and Half-Life Alyx were popping off at the same time. Both teams were communicating like crazy, and Valve was talking about actually like starting to make games again and communicating with their audience and learning from their failures. And then 6 months pass after all of it, and then they disappear and go back to their old ways. Disappointment aside, Underlords to me represented what felt like the rebirth of Valve, only to have Valve crawl back into their butthole. Underlords was originally supposed to have a new season every 4 to 6 months, but each season was supposed to have new Underlords release, and in fact, they had 8 more planned that were being sprinkled and teased in comics and SFM shorts and in-game lore text, and I was data mining it like crazy. Me and Piston Miner were able to rebuild some of the upcoming features. They were creating this single-player campaign that really dived into the story of the assassination of Mama Eve and who was going to take over as, you know, the king of the Underlords, and I don't remember everything about it, but the story, the customization features, the communication with the developers, and just the addictive gameplay cycle that they had created, only for Adrian Final to get bored a month after the game came out. Day of Defeat, B. Not as good as Counter-Strike 1.6, not by a fucking mile. But Day of Defeat is very fun under the right conditions. Okay, the next one is Counter-Strike Condition Zero. The thing is, there's 2 versions of Condition Zero, and I'm gonna make a really controversial claim here. I've made a video about this in 2016 describing the horrific development cycle of Condition Zero, where the game went through 5 different companies before it actually came out. Condition Zero deleted scenes, the one that Ritual did, the one that Valve pulled because they didn't like the review scores, is better. Playing against bots in multiplayer maps specifically to do certain tasks, it's boring. So in modern day, deleted scenes is this really interesting, almost total conversion mod of Half-Life that explores the Counter-Strike universe that isn't canon or anything. And the Ritual one that's available to play, it's out. It's called Counter-Strike Condition Zero Deleted Scenes. It's good. It's not great, but it's good. I'm giving it a C. The C is for deleted scenes. If we were talking about the actual Condition Zero, F. Half-Life 1, S. It's not the best Half-Life game. Half-Life 1, up there with Doom and Quake and Duke Nukem 3D and Halo and Unreal Tournament as some of the most important first-person shooters, important video games in history. We look at it now and go, the gunplay aged pretty great. The story, that's just because it was so influential, everybody copied it. Half-Life 1, at the time it came out, was mind-blowingly insane. Not only did it pioneer so much in the unbroken narrative, scripted sequences, story-based, more serious first-person shooter, it also pioneered one of the most important modding scenes in the history of gaming. Yes, Doom's modding scene is probably more important, but Half-Life's modding scene gave us way too much good shit. Half-Life Blue Shift, that is an E. That's a D. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. It's a D. Blue Shift is okay. Blue Shift originally was just this extra little bit of Half-Life that Gearbox made add value to the Dreamcast release of Half-Life 1. But the game was made with the Dreamcast's technical limitations in mind, and that shows. Like, Half-Life is gray corridors. Blue Shift is tight gray corridors. The beginning is pretty good. Everything until Zen is boring, and then it's the worst version of Zen, and then it just ends out of nowhere. Day of Defeat Source, it's the same kind of thing as Counter-Strike Source. It's not as good as the original because they didn't put enough work into making it as good as the original. Day of Defeat Source is fun. Day of Defeat Source has a lot of cool stuff, but Day of Defeat Source is a tech demo. Day of Defeat was a mod made out of passion. Day of Defeat Source was a tech demo. Half-Life 2, A. Half-Life 2 is not aged as well as Half-Life 1. There are parts of Half-Life 2 that whenever I'm doing a playthrough, I loathe getting to. Highway 17 is boring. Team Fortress Classic, that's a C. Nowhere near as good as the perfection of Team Fortress 2, especially on release. Portal 2, A. It's great. It's a fantastic game. It was the last OG Valve game ever to come out. I like co-op better than single player. I think Portal 2 was a really great value for money because you had effectively 2 games in there. And then nowadays you have probably the best implementation of custom content Valve has ever done. It's not S because, like Half-Life 2, Portal 2 is a bit indulgent, whereas something like Episode 2, or as we're going to get to Portal 1, everything that's there needs to be there, and it's just like all killer, no filler. Portal 2 has like two bits where you're just walking around looking for portable surfaces. Portal 2 has a lot of what are effectively the most cutscene scripted sequences that Valve has ever done. It takes way too long to get to the first chamber. You have the whole introductory sequence, which was really fun on the first time, but then every time you try and play it again, you gotta sit there and watch this masturbatorial physics sequence. Portal 2 has level loads where I feel like it doesn't need level loads. Portal 2 has like 1,000, it has way too many level loads. Deathmatch Classic, it's just Quake but worse. Artifact, it's just Gwent but incredibly predatory. The Lab, decent tech demo. Opposing Force, fantastic. It's really, really good. It has one boring bit near the end. Opposing Force has a better campaign than Half-Life 1, but Opposing Force is nowhere near as important as Half-Life 1. It's just fun. It's just fun. The wrench is probably the only reason why it... no, I hate the wrench, and the night vision gives me a migraine. Why can't I just have a crowbar and a damn flashlight? Okay, Portal 1, S. It's the best video game ever made. I have nothing more to say than it is the single best video game ever made. Portal 1 is the only reason I'm talking to you right now. I have never felt such an emotional attachment to a video game before or since the best video game ever made. Gary's Mod, B. Has some really fantastic custom content, but also has some of the weirdest Valve communities that exist. And then Half-Life Decay, C. Really interesting experiment. I feel like they should have playtested it a bit more. It's hard as hell. We're missing Half-Life Alyx. Half-Life Alyx would be an A, putting Half-Life Alyx there. Why isn't Half-Life Alyx an S? Half-Life Alyx was a failed experiment. There, I said it. I ripped the Band-Aid off. Half-Life Alyx is a fan-damn-tastic game. Valve lost the VR war. Valve can't focus on something once it's out. Once something is finished and out, they don't want to look at it anymore. So everybody that's buying the Steam Deck, get ready for 6 months of support and then 3 years of silence and annoying broken bugs. Half-Life Alyx should have been the start of something bigger. The biggest mistake that Valve made with Half-Life Alyx was not communicating with third-party developers about how high the bar they're about to set. A bar so high, no other developer will ever be able to fucking surpass it. They researched how to make every single interaction in VR the most comfortable thing they possibly could. Didn't tell anyone about any of their findings except one time. Carrie Davis talked about doors for an hour, put it out into the world, made a half-assed map editor, did the developer commentary, and then disappeared, leaving the VR marketplace to flounder around as all developers attempted to catch up. And the problem is, no one has the kind of resources dedicated to VR development that Valve had. So Half-Life Alyx represents Valve's Achilles. They don't pay attention to the rest of the industry. They don't care because they don't have to. Half-Life Alyx was the safest thing that Valve could have done for a VR game. Look, I have no industry contacts, but the other passionate gamers that I've talked about Half-Life Alyx with before its release, before its announcement, following its announcement, is that Valve was unwilling to make any kind of daring choice. They didn't have smooth locomotion working until 2 months before the game came out. 4 guns, no dual-handed guns, you walk very slowly, the level design is made specifically for teleporting, they never ambush you with a large amount of enemies until the very last chapter, and even then, they're piling on so many health kits that it doesn't matter. They didn't challenge the player because in their mind, this is the start of something bigger. This is introducing people to VR, only for it to be the final good big VR game on PC. It wasn't a send-off. It was supposed to be a beginning, and then Valve got bored, and they left. If it was going to be like the send-off for VR, like the swan song for VR, then they should have just went balls to the wall and made it, yeah, uncomfortable for beginners, but this game's only going to be played by the hardcore fans anyways. So that's my Half-Life, that's my Valve games tier list. I have a really weird relationship with Valve. I'm one of the foremost experts of Valve software that doesn't work at Valve software in the world. I have no industry contacts. I am a very passionate gamer. I hope you don't kill me for my opinions. I'm Tyler Haircut McVicker. Thank you very much for watching. Go check out my CrowdMade store. We have limited time holiday merch until the end of December, and we have some Passionate Gamer merch on the way that should be releasing the week after Christmas. I love you guys. Peace and hair grease. Hope you have a good life. Adios.